Mr. Robert Harrison was 72 years old. He lived in the biggest house in Chicago, Illinois. His mansion had 42 rooms, including a library that was bigger than most people's entire homes. Robert owned banks, restaurants, shopping malls, and office buildings all over America. He was so rich that he could buy a new car every single day for the rest of his life and still have money left over. But Robert Harrison was not happy. He had 3 grown-up children, Michael, Jennifer, and David. They were all adults now, with their own families. But they never came to visit him just to say hello or have dinner together. They only called him when they needed something. "Dad, my car broke down. Can you buy me a new one?" Michael would ask. "Father, I want to take a vacation to Hawaii. Can you pay for it?" Jennifer would say. "Pop, my business needs more money. Can you give me a loan?" David would demand. Every time they called, they wanted money. They never asked, "Dad, how are you feeling? Are you lonely? Do you need anything?" They never said, "I love you," or "I miss you." Robert had learned something sad over the years. He learned that when you have a lot of money, it's hard to know who really cares about you. Are people nice to you because they like you? Or are they nice because they want your money? This made Robert very suspicious. That's a big word that means he didn't trust anyone. He always thought people were trying to trick him or steal from him. And sometimes he was right. Over the years, Robert had caught many people stealing from his house. One security guard had taken expensive watches from his bedroom. A gardener had stolen silver candlesticks from the dining room. Even his personal assistant had used Robert's credit card to buy things for herself. Each time someone stole from him, Robert's heart became a little harder. He started to believe that every single person in the world was greedy and selfish. He thought that if he gave people a chance to take something without getting caught, they would always take it. So Robert came up with a test. It was a mean test, but Robert thought it was necessary. Here's what Robert would do. He would sit in his favorite brown leather chair in the library. He would close his eyes and pretend to be asleep. Then he would leave something valuable near him, maybe a wallet full of cash, or an expensive watch, or jewelry. When a worker came into the room to clean or bring him something, Robert would pretend to be sleeping. He would breathe slowly and deeply, making snoring sounds. The worker would see the valuable item sitting there, easy to grab. Robert would wait. He would listen carefully with his eyes closed. And almost every time, the worker would take the valuable item. Then Robert would open his eyes, catch them red-handed, and fire them immediately. He would call them a thief and tell them to get out of his house. "See?" Robert would think to himself. "Everyone is a thief. You can't trust anyone. Money makes people do terrible things." This made Robert feel sad and angry at the same time. But it also made him feel like he was right about the world. He believed that his test proved that all people were bad. Robert had done this test at least 30 times over the past 10 years. And almost everyone had failed. Almost everyone had taken the money, or the watch, or the jewelry. But today, Robert was going to test someone new. Today, he was going to test his newest maid and her young son. Maria Rodriguez had been working at the Harrison mansion for only 3 weeks. She was 31 years old, but she looked older because of the stress in her life. Maria had come to America from Mexico when she was a teenager. She had worked hard, learned English, and married a wonderful man named Carlos. They had a son together named Tommy. Life was good. But then something terrible happened. 2 years ago, Carlos was working on a construction site, building a new office building downtown. There was an accident. A heavy beam fell, and Carlos was killed instantly. Maria was devastated. That means she was so sad that she could barely function. She cried every day for months. But she had Tommy to take care of. Tommy was only 6 years old when his father died. Now he was 8. After Carlos died, Maria discovered that they had many debts. Carlos had borrowed money to start his own small construction business. When he died, Maria had to pay back all that money. She sold their small house. She sold their car. She sold almost everything they owned. Now, Maria and Tommy lived in a tiny apartment on the south side of Chicago. The apartment only had one bedroom, which Tommy used. Maria slept on an old couch in the living room. The heating didn't work very well, so they were often cold in the winter. Sometimes Maria had to choose between paying for heat or buying food. Getting the job at Mr. Harrison's mansion was like a miracle for Maria. The job paid well, better than any job she'd ever had. If she could keep this job for a year, she could pay off all her debts and maybe even save some money. But Maria was terrified of making a mistake. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Patricia Wilson, had warned her on the first day. "Mr. Harrison is very strict. He doesn't like noise. He doesn't like mistakes. And he especially doesn't like children. Never ever bring your son to work. If Mr. Harrison sees a child in this house, you'll be fired immediately." Maria had promised she would never bring Tommy to work. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chin, usually watched Tommy after school. But today was different. It was a Saturday in late October. The weather forecast had predicted a big storm, and they were right. By morning, the wind was howling so loudly it sounded like a wild animal. Rain pounded against the windows like thousands of tiny hammers. But the worst part was what happened at Tommy's school. There was a flood in the basement where all the heating equipment was kept. The principal called all the parents and said, "School is closed today for emergency repairs. Please come pick up your children." Maria was already at work when she got the call. Her heart sank. Mrs. Chin was out of town visiting her daughter. Maria's other neighbors were at work. She had no one to watch Tommy. She called the school and explained the situation. The teacher said, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Rodriguez, but I can't stay with Tommy all day. You need to come get him." Maria felt panic rising in her chest. She found Mrs. Wilson and explained the situation. "Please, Mrs. Wilson," Maria begged. "I have nowhere else to take him. Can I please bring Tommy here just for today? I promise he'll be completely silent. He'll sit in the corner. Mr. Harrison won't even know he's here." Mrs. Wilson frowned. She was a tall, thin woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had worked for Mr. Harrison for 20 years, and she knew how much he valued his quiet, child-free home. "Maria," Mrs. Wilson said seriously, "if Mr. Harrison sees that boy, you'll be fired. And I might be fired too for allowing it." "I understand," Maria said, tears filling her eyes. "But I have no choice. If I don't pick up Tommy, the school will call Child Protective Services. Please. I'm begging you." Mrs. Wilson looked at Maria's desperate face. She remembered being a young mother herself, struggling to make ends meet. She sighed heavily. "Fine," she said. "But the boy stays in the storage room near the kitchen. He doesn't move. He doesn't make a sound. And if Mr. Harrison finds out, you'll say I didn't know. Understood?" "Yes, yes, thank you," Maria cried. "Thank you so much." Maria quickly left the mansion, drove through the terrible storm, and picked up Tommy from school. When they got back to the mansion, Maria held Tommy's shoulders and looked him straight in the eye. "Tommy, listen to me very carefully," she said. "We are in a very serious situation. Mr. Harrison, the man who owns this house, doesn't allow children here. If he sees you, I'll lose my job. Do you understand what that means?" Tommy nodded. He was a small boy for his age, with dark brown hair and big brown eyes that looked too serious for an 8-year-old. Since his father died, Tommy had grown up faster than he should have. He understood that his mom worked hard and that money was always tight. "If you lose your job, we won't have money for food or our apartment," Tommy said quietly. "That's right," Maria said. "So I need you to be absolutely silent. Like a mouse. Can you do that?" "Yes, Mama," Tommy promised. They snuck in through the back door. Mrs. Wilson was waiting for them. She led them to a small storage room near the kitchen that was full of cleaning supplies. "He stays here," Mrs. Wilson said firmly. "Maria, you have work to do. The library needs cleaning, and Mr. Harrison's study needs dusting. Get to work, And check on the boy every 20 minutes. Yes, ma'am, Maria said. She hugged Tommy quickly. Stay here. Don't move. I'll bring you a sandwich in a little while. Okay, Mama, Tommy whispered. Maria went to start her work, her heart pounding with worry. But she had no idea that today was the day Mr. Harrison had planned to do his test. And she had no idea that everything was about to change. In his library, Robert Harrison was preparing for his test. The library was his favorite room in the entire mansion. The walls were covered with bookshelves that reached all the way to the ceiling. There were thousands of books, old books with leather covers, new books with shiny jackets, books about history and science and adventure. In the center of the room was Robert's favorite chair. It was made of soft brown leather and was so comfortable that Robert sometimes actually did fall asleep in it. There was a small wooden table next to the chair, perfect for holding a cup of coffee or a book. Today, Robert was going to use that table for his test. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. Inside the envelope was $10,000 in cash. That's right, $10,000. It was all in $100 bills stacked neatly. Robert had chosen this amount carefully. It was enough money to change a poor person's life. With $10,000, you could pay rent for several months, or buy a used car, or pay off debts. It was enough money to tempt even an honest person. Robert placed the envelope on the small table next to his chair. He positioned it carefully so that it looked like it had been carelessly left there. He even opened the envelope slightly so that anyone walking by could clearly see the green $100 bills inside. Then Robert sat down in his leather chair. He adjusted his position several times until he found the perfect slumping posture, the kind of posture that made him look like a tired old man who had dozed off after lunch. He closed his eyes and began breathing slowly and deeply. In and out. In and out. Every few breaths, he added a little snoring sound. Zzzzzzzzzzzzzzz. Robert had perfected this act over the years. He looked completely asleep, but he was wide awake. His mind was sharp and alert. His hearing was focused. He was waiting. He knew that Maria, his newest maid, was scheduled to clean the library today. He had seen her around the house for the past 3 weeks. She seemed nice enough, always polite, always working hard. But Robert had learned not to trust appearances. She's probably just like all the others, Robert thought to himself. She'll see the money, look around to make sure no one is watching, and then she'll take it. They always do. Part of Robert hoped he was wrong. Deep down, in a tiny corner of his heart that wasn't completely frozen, he hoped that someday someone would prove him wrong. He hoped that someday someone would walk into the room, see the money, and just leave it there. But it had never happened. Not in 30 tests over 10 years. Everyone had taken the money. Everyone had failed. Robert heard footsteps in the hallway outside the library. They were getting closer. His heart beat a little faster. The test was about to begin. The doorknob turned slowly. The heavy wooden door creaked open. Robert kept his eyes closed and continued his slow, steady breathing. But what Robert didn't know was that the person entering the room wasn't just Maria. Maria had brought someone with her. Someone small. Someone who was about to do something that would completely shock Robert Harrison and change his life forever. Maria pushed open the library door as quietly as she could. She was carrying her cleaning supplies, a duster, a bottle of furniture polish, and some clean rags. She planned to dust the bookshelves, polish the wooden furniture, and then get out as quickly as possible. But Tommy had followed her. When Maria had gone to check on Tommy in the storage room, she found him shivering. The storage room was cold and dark, and Tommy looked scared and miserable sitting there all alone. "Mama, I'm cold," Tommy had whispered. "And it's scary in here. I heard strange noises." Maria's heart broke. She couldn't leave her 8-year-old son sitting alone in a cold, dark storage room for hours. It was cruel. But what choice did she have? Then she remembered, Mrs. Wilson had said that Mr. Harrison was in his library this afternoon. Mrs. Wilson specifically told Maria to clean the library while Mr. Harrison was there because he liked having someone quietly working nearby. It made him feel less alone, even though he never talked to the staff. But more importantly, Mrs. Wilson had mentioned that Mr. Harrison always took a nap in his chair after lunch on Saturdays. He would be asleep. If he's asleep, he won't see Tommy, Maria thought. I can bring Tommy with me, make him sit quietly in the corner, and Mr. Harrison will never know. It was risky, but Maria decided to take the chance. She went back to the storage room, took Tommy's hand, and whispered, "Come with me. But you must be absolutely silent. Promise?" "I promise, Mama," Tommy whispered back. Now they were both entering the library. Maria looked toward the leather chair and saw exactly what she expected. Mr. Harrison was slumped in his chair, eyes closed, breathing deeply. He was clearly asleep. Good, Maria thought. We'll be fine as long as we're quiet. She turned to Tommy and pointed to a corner of the library far away from Mr. Harrison's chair. There was a small rug there and a bookshelf that would hide Tommy from view if Mr. Harrison woke up and looked around. Maria bent down and whispered directly into Tommy's ear, so quietly that even a person standing 3 feet away wouldn't have heard. Sit in that corner on the rug. Don't move. Don't touch anything. Don't make a sound. That man is sleeping. If you wake him up, Mama will lose her job. Do you understand? Tommy looked at his mother's frightened face and nodded seriously. He understood. He tiptoed over to the corner and sat down on the rug, making himself as small as possible. He pulled his knees up to his chest and wrapped his arms around them, trying to stay warm. His jacket was still damp from the rain outside. Maria watched him for a moment, making sure he was settled. Then she turned and began her work. She started at the far end of the library, dusting the bookshelves that were farthest from Mr. Harrison's chair. She worked carefully and quietly, barely making a sound. Meanwhile, in his chair, Robert was very much awake. His eyes were closed, but his mind was racing. I heard 2 sets of footsteps, he thought. The maid didn't come alone. She brought someone with her. Who? Another maid? No, those footsteps were too light. Too small. A child? Robert's curiosity was intense. He wanted to open his eyes and look, but he couldn't break character yet. Not until whoever was in the room did something worth catching. He listened carefully. He could hear Maria moving around at the far end of the library, gently dusting the shelves. But he also heard something else, the quiet sound of someone breathing in the corner near the door. Small breaths. Quick breaths. Nervous breaths. Definitely a child, Robert thought. The maid brought a child into my house. Into my library? After I specifically told Mrs. Wilson that children were not allowed. Robert felt anger rising in his chest. This was unacceptable. He would catch them, fire Maria on the spot, and fire Mrs. Wilson too for allowing this to happen. But then Robert had another thought. Wait. This could make the test even better. Let's see what happens. So Robert continued pretending to sleep. He breathed slowly and deeply. Every minute or so, he added a little snore. Zzzz. He waited to see what the maid and the child would do. Maria worked quickly but quietly. She dusted 3 bookcases, polished a side table, and straightened some books that were out of place. She kept glancing over at Tommy to make sure he was staying still and quiet. He was. But then Maria realized she had a problem. She needed to go to the supply closet on the 2nd floor to get more furniture polish. She had run out, and there was still a lot of furniture in the library that needed polishing. Maria looked at Mr. Harrison. He was definitely still asleep. She could hear him snoring softly. She looked at Tommy. He was sitting perfectly still in the corner, exactly as she had told him to. I'll only be gone for 5 minutes, Maria thought. Tommy will be fine. And Mr. Harrison is asleep. Nothing bad will happen. Maria walked quietly over to Tommy. She bent down and whispered in his ear again. Tommy, I have to go get more cleaning supplies. I'll be back in 5 minutes. Stay exactly where you are. Don't move even 1 inch. Don't touch anything. Don't make any noise at all. Okay? Tommy nodded. Okay, Mama. I'll be quiet. Good boy, Maria whispered. She kissed the top of his head quickly and then stood up. She took one more look at Mr. Harrison, still sleeping peacefully, and then she quietly left the library, closing the door softly behind her. The door clicked shut. And now it was just Robert and Tommy alone in the library. Robert had heard every word of the whispered conversation. His heart was beating faster now. This was it. The real test was about to begin. He knew the child was alone. He knew that children were curious. He knew that children often touched things they weren't supposed to touch. And most importantly, he knew that poor children, children who had never had much money, would be very tempted by an envelope full of cash. Let's see what this kid does, Robert thought. Let's see if he's a thief like everyone else. The library was very quiet now. The only sounds were the rain hitting the windows, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, and Robert's fake snoring. Tick. Tock. Tick. Tock. Zzzz. Robert waited. At first, Tommy didn't move at all. He stayed in his corner, sitting on the rug with his knees pulled up to his chest. He was cold, and he was a little bit scared. The library was a huge room with tall ceilings and dark wooden furniture. The rain outside made everything feel gloomy and spooky. Tommy looked at the sleeping old man in the chair. He had never seen Mr. Harrison before. His mama had told him that Mr. Harrison was the owner of the house and that he was very rich and very strict. The old man looked sad, Tommy thought. Even though he was sleeping, his face looked unhappy. There were deep wrinkles on his forehead and around his mouth, the kind of wrinkles that come from frowning a lot. 5 minutes passed. Robert kept waiting. He was starting to think that maybe this kid was different. Maybe this kid would just sit there quietly and not do anything. Well, that would be boring, Robert thought. But at least I wouldn't have to fire his mother. But then Robert heard something. A small sound. The rustling of clothing. The boy was standing up. Tommy had been trying to stay still, but his legs were starting to hurt from sitting in the same position for so long. He shifted slightly, trying to get more comfortable. As he moved, he looked around the library more carefully. That's when he noticed something on the small table next to Mr. Harrison's chair. It was an envelope. And inside the envelope, Tommy could see money. A lot of money. More money than Tommy had ever seen in his whole life. The envelope was stuffed with green $100 bills. Tommy's eyes widened. He knew what a $100 bill looked like because his papa had once shown him one before he died. His papa had been so proud, saying, "Tommy, I worked overtime all week and got paid cash. Look at this. We're going to use this to buy your mama a birthday present." But Tommy had never seen so many $100 bills all together. There must have been 100 of them. Actually, there were exactly 100 bills, which is how Robert got to $10,000, but Tommy didn't know how to count that high yet. Tommy stared at the money. He thought about all the things that money could buy. He thought about how his mama was always worried about money. He thought about how their apartment was cold because they couldn't always afford to turn the heat on. He thought about how his mama sometimes skipped meals so that Tommy could eat more. With that much money, Tommy thought, Mama wouldn't have to worry anymore. We could buy warm coats. We could buy food. We could fix the heating in our apartment. Robert, still pretending to sleep, was listening very carefully. He heard the boy's breathing change. It got faster. Robert could almost feel the child's excitement. Here it comes, Robert thought. The kid sees the money. Now he's going to take it. They always take it. Robert prepared himself. In a few seconds he would hear the sound of paper rustling as the boy grabbed the envelope. Then Robert would open his eyes, catch the boy red-handed, and fire his mother. It was sad, but it was necessary. It would prove once again that everyone was a thief. But Robert had no idea what was actually about to happen. Tommy stood up slowly. His legs were stiff from sitting still for so long. He looked at his mama's cleaning supplies sitting on the floor near where she had been working. He looked at the sleeping old man. He looked at the money. And then Tommy started walking toward Mr. Harrison's chair. Robert heard the footsteps approaching. They were soft footsteps, but they were getting closer. And closer. And closer. The footsteps stopped right next to Robert's chair. This is it, Robert thought. He's going to grab the money. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But the grab never came. Instead, Robert felt something that confused him completely. He felt a small hand gently touch his arm. The touch was so light and soft that Robert almost thought he had imagined it. The boy's hand was cold. Robert's mind raced. What is the kid doing? Why is he touching my arm? Is he checking to see if I'm really asleep? Is he going to shake me awake? But Tommy wasn't trying to wake Mr. Harrison up. He was just feeling the old man's arm through his suit jacket. And what Tommy felt worried him. Mr. Harrison's arm was cold. Very cold. Tommy had learned about this from his mama. After his papa died, Maria had become very protective of Tommy's health. She always said, "When people are cold, they can get sick. We have to stay warm." Tommy looked at Mr. Harrison more carefully now. The old man's hands were resting on the arms of the chair, and Tommy could see that his fingers looked pale. The library was pretty cold too, even though there was a small heater in the corner. The storm outside had made everything chilly. Tommy felt a surge of worry. This old man was cold. He was sleeping, and he was cold, and cold people could get sick. Tommy knew exactly what his mama would do in this situation. She would get a blanket and cover the person up to keep them warm. But Tommy didn't see any blankets in the library. He looked around the room, searching for something, anything, that could be used to keep the old man warm. Then Tommy looked down at what he was wearing. He had on his school clothes, a pair of jeans, a t-shirt, and his jacket. His jacket wasn't very good. It was old and thin, and it had a small tear in the sleeve. It was hand-me-down from a neighbor's kid who had grown too big for it. But it was the only jacket Tommy owned. Tommy didn't hesitate. He unzipped his jacket and took it off. The cold air of the library immediately made Tommy shiver, but he ignored it. This was more important. Carefully, very carefully, Tommy draped his small jacket over Mr. Harrison's legs. It didn't cover much. Mr. Harrison was a full-grown man, and Tommy's jacket was made for an 8-year-old boy. But Tommy arranged it as best he could, tucking it around the old man's knees. Then Tommy did something else. He reached out and very gently patted Mr. Harrison's hand, the way Tommy's papa used to pat Tommy's hand when he was tucking him into bed at night. "There," Tommy whispered very, very quietly. "You'll be warmer now." Robert Harrison, the billionaire who had seen everything, who thought he understood how every person in the world operated, who believed that everyone was selfish and greedy, Robert Harrison was completely frozen in shock. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. This child, this poor child who had nothing, had just taken off his only jacket and used it to cover a stranger. A rich stranger who was pretending to sleep. A stranger who didn't need the jacket at all because he owned 100 jackets upstairs in his closet. The boy hadn't even looked at the money. He had walked right past $10,000 in cash and hadn't touched it. Instead, he had given Robert his jacket. Robert's mind was spinning. This isn't possible. This isn't how people behave. This isn't. But it was happening. It had just happened. Robert had felt it with his own skin, the small, cold hand touching his arm, and then the thin fabric of a child's jacket being carefully placed over his legs. Robert wanted to open his eyes. He wanted to sit up and look at this boy. He wanted to understand who this child was, and why he had done such a thing. But Robert's acting skills were too good. He had trained himself to stay perfectly still during his tests, no matter what happened. His body remained frozen in his sleeping position, even though his mind was screaming. Tommy stepped back from the chair. He looked at Mr. Harrison one more time to make sure the jacket was secure and wouldn't fall off. Then he started to turn around to go back to his corner. But as Tommy turned, his elbow accidentally bumped against the small table. The envelope full of money wobbled. It teetered right on the edge of the table, about to fall onto the floor. Tommy's eyes went wide. He quickly reached out and caught the envelope before it could fall. He held it in his hands for a moment, feeling how heavy it was. And that's when Robert's heart sank. Here it is. He couldn't resist after all. He's going to take it now. But once again, Tommy did something Robert didn't expect. Tommy held the envelope in his small hands. It was heavier than he expected. He could feel all those bills inside, thick and crisp. For a moment, Tommy just stood there, looking at all that money. He had never held this much money before. He had never even imagined holding this much money. Tommy thought about his mama again. He thought about how tired she looked all the time. He thought about the holes in her shoes that she tried to hide by coloring them in with a black marker. He thought about how she always said, "I'm not hungry, baby, you eat," even though Tommy knew she was hungry. This money could change everything. But then Tommy thought about something else. He thought about what his papa used to tell him before he died. Carlos had always said, "Tommy, there are two kinds of people in this world. There are people who take things that don't belong to them, and there are people who protect things for others. Always be a protector, son. Always." Tommy looked at the sleeping old man. This money belonged to Mr. Harrison. It wasn't Tommy's money. It wasn't his mama's money. Taking it would be stealing, and stealing was wrong. Papa had always said so. Mama had always said so too. Besides, Tommy thought, if Mama found out I stole money, she would be so sad. She would cry. And I never want to make Mama cry. Tommy made his decision. He carefully placed the envelope back on the table. But as he set it down, he noticed something. The envelope had been very close to the edge of the table. That's why it had almost fallen. If Mr. Harrison woke up and bumped the table, or if a strong wind came through when someone opened the door, the envelope might fall to the floor. The money might spill everywhere. Tommy pushed the envelope to the center of the table, far away from the edge. There. Now it was safe. But then Tommy noticed something else on the floor near Mr. Harrison's chair. It was a small black notebook. It must have slipped off the old man's lap when he fell asleep. The notebook was lying on the floor, half under the chair. Tommy bent down and picked up the notebook. He brushed some dust off the cover with his sleeve. Then he placed the notebook on the table next to the envelope, where Mr. Harrison would see it when he woke up. "There," Tommy whispered to himself. "Now everything is safe." Robert, still frozen in his sleeping position, couldn't believe what he was witnessing. The boy had held the money in his hands. He could have easily taken it. He could have slipped a few bills into his pocket, and Robert never would have known exactly how much money had been in the envelope. But the boy had put it back. Not only had he put it back, but he had made sure it was safe. He had protected Robert's money and Robert's notebook. Why? Robert's mind screamed. Why would he do this? What does he want? What's his angle? But Robert was starting to realize something shocking. Maybe this boy didn't have an angle. Maybe this boy was just good. Actually good. Good for no reason. Good because that's who he was. Tommy turned around and started walking back toward his corner. As he walked, he wrapped his arms around himself, trying to stay warm without his jacket. He sat back down on the rug and made himself small again, shivering slightly. Robert's heart felt like it was breaking. The boy had given Robert his only jacket, and now the boy was cold. The boy had protected Robert's money, even though that money could have changed his and his mother's lives. For the first time in 20 years, Robert Harrison felt something he had almost forgotten how to feel: shame. He felt deeply, terribly ashamed of himself. What have I become? Robert thought. What kind of man sets traps for children? What kind of man tests people instead of trusting them? Robert wanted to end the test right then and there. He wanted to sit up, call the boy over, and apologize. He wanted to give the boy his jacket back and wrap him in a real blanket. He wanted to give the boy the $10,000 and more. But before Robert could move, he heard footsteps in the hallway. Quick footsteps. Worried footsteps. Maria was coming back. Maria had run all the way from the second-floor supply closet back to the library. She had been gone for almost 10 minutes, much longer than she had planned. There had been a problem with the supply closet door. It had gotten stuck, and she'd had to struggle with it to get it open. The whole time, she had been thinking, Tommy is alone. What if he moved? What if he made noise? What if Mr. Harrison woke up? Now Maria was hurrying back, her heart pounding with fear. She quietly opened the library door and slipped inside. The first thing she saw was Tommy sitting in the corner where she had left him. Good. He was still there. The second thing she saw made her blood run cold. Tommy's jacket, his small, worn, blue jacket, was draped over Mr. Harrison's legs. No, Maria thought. No, 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 no. Maria's eyes darted around the room. She saw the envelope of money on the table. It was still there, but it had been moved. It was in a different position than before. Maria's mind immediately jumped to the worst possible conclusion. She thought, Tommy touched the money. He tried to take it. Then he got scared and put it back. Then he put his jacket on Mr. Harrison to try to what? To apologize? To distract him? Maria didn't understand what had happened, but she knew it was bad. Very bad. She looked at Mr. Harrison. He was still sleeping, still snoring softly. But for how much longer? What if he woke up and saw Tommy's jacket on him? What if he had already woken up and seen everything, and he was just waiting to catch them? Maria felt panic rise in her throat. She rushed over to Tommy and grabbed his arm, pulling him to his feet. Tommy! She whispered urgently, her voice sharp with fear. What did you do? Why is your jacket on him? Did you touch the money? Tommy looked up at his mother with wide, confused eyes. Mama, Shh! Maria hissed. She looked at Mr. Harrison, terrified that Tommy's voice would wake him. With shaking hands, Maria reached out and grabbed Tommy's jacket from Mr. Harrison's legs. She pulled it off quickly, almost knocking over the small table in her panic. I'm sorry, Maria whispered, though she didn't know if she was saying it to Tommy, to Mr. Harrison, or to God. She shoved the jacket at Tommy. Put this on. We have to leave. Now. Before he wakes up. But Mama, Tommy tried to explain. Not now, Tommy! Maria's voice cracked. Tears were starting to run down her face. We have to go. You've ruined everything. We're going to lose our apartment. We're going to end up on the street. I told you not to move. I told you not to touch anything. Tommy's face crumpled. He hadn't seen his mama this upset since Papa died. I'm sorry, Mama. I just wanted. Put on your jacket, Maria ordered, her voice breaking. Tommy put on his jacket with trembling hands. He was crying now too, silent tears running down his cheeks. Maria grabbed Tommy's hand and started pulling him toward the door. She needed to get him out of the library before Mr. Harrison woke up. Maybe, just maybe, if they left quickly enough, Mr. Harrison wouldn't know that Tommy had been there at all. But just as Maria reached the door, she heard a sound that made her freeze in terror. A voice. A deep, gravelly voice. Stop. Maria's hand was on the doorknob. She could have turned it, opened the door, and run. But something in that voice made her stop. It wasn't an angry voice. It was something else. Something she couldn't quite identify. Slowly, Maria turned around. Mr. Harrison was sitting up in his chair. His eyes were open, and he was looking directly at them. His face was impossible to read. It wasn't angry, but it wasn't friendly either. Come here, Robert said. Sir, Maria began. I said come here, Robert repeated more firmly this time. Maria's legs felt like they were made of water, but she forced herself to walk back toward Mr. Harrison's chair, still holding Tommy's hand tightly. They stood in front of him, both of them trembling. Maria couldn't look Mr. Harrison in the eye. She stared at the floor, waiting for the words she knew were coming. "You're fired. Get out of my house." But those words didn't come. Instead, Mr. Harrison asked a question. "What is your name, boy?" Robert asked, looking at Tommy. Tommy's voice was so quiet it was almost impossible to hear. "Tommy, sir." "Tommy," Robert repeated. He leaned forward in his chair, his elbows on his knees. "Tommy, I need you to tell me the truth. Did you touch the money on that table?" Maria squeezed her eyes shut. This was it. They were caught. But Tommy, despite his fear, answered honestly. "Yes, sir. I touched the envelope." Maria let out a small sob. "And what did you do with it?" Robert asked. I moved it to the middle of the table, sir," Tommy said, his voice shaking. "It was too close to the edge. It almost fell. I didn't want it to fall on the floor." Robert stared at the boy. "You moved it to the middle of the table?" "Yes, sir." "And did you take any money out of it?" "No, sir," Tommy said quickly. "That's your money, not mine. Taking it would be stealing." Robert felt that crack in his heart growing wider. "Why did you put your jacket on me?" Tommy looked up at Mr. Harrison for the first time. "Because you were cold, sir. Your hands looked cold. And Mama always says that when people are cold, they can get sick. So I gave you my jacket to keep you warm." "You gave me your jacket," Robert repeated slowly. "Your only jacket." "Yes, sir. Even though you don't know me. Even though I'm just a stranger to you." Tommy nodded. "Mama says we should help people when they need help. Cold people need to be warm. It doesn't matter if they're strangers." Robert looked at Maria. She was crying quietly, her shoulders shaking. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Robert said. "Yes, sir?" Maria whispered, her voice barely audible. "Look at me." Maria forced herself to look up. Her eyes were red and full of tears. "How long have you worked for me?" Robert asked. 3 weeks, sir." "And have you enjoyed working here?" Maria didn't know how to answer that question. The truth was, she had been terrified every single day. Terrified of making a mistake, terrified of being fired, terrified of not being good enough. I've tried my best, sir," Maria finally said. Robert nodded slowly. "I'm sure you have." He paused, then said, "I need to tell you something. I need to tell you both something. And I need you to listen carefully." Maria and Tommy waited, holding hands. "I wasn't asleep," Robert said. Maria's eyes widened. "What?" "I wasn't asleep," Robert repeated. "I was pretending. I heard everything. I felt everything. I was awake the entire time." Maria felt the room spin. You were awake?" "Yes," Robert said. "I was testing you. Both of you. I left that money on the table on purpose. I wanted to see if you would steal it." The words hit Maria like a slap. "You were testing us?" Her voice was a mixture of hurt and disbelief. "Yes," Robert admitted. He couldn't meet her eyes now. He was the one looking at the floor. "I've done this test many times over the years. I've tested maids, gardeners, drivers, assistants. Almost everyone I've tested has failed. Almost everyone has taken the money. So this was all a trap," Maria said. Her fear was being replaced by something else now, anger. "You were trying to catch us. You were trying to prove that we're thieves." "Yes," Robert said quietly. "That's exactly what I was trying to do." "How dare you!" Maria's voice was louder now. "How dare you treat us like criminals? We came into your house to work, to earn an honest living, and you set traps for us like we're animals." Tommy had never heard his mother speak to anyone like this before. He squeezed her hand, worried. But Robert didn't get angry. Instead, he did something that shocked Maria. He nodded. "You're right," Robert said. "You're absolutely right. I had no right to do that. I had no right to test you or to treat you that way." Maria blinked in surprise. Robert continued, I've become a bitter, suspicious old man. I stopped trusting people years ago. I started to believe that everyone in the world was greedy and selfish. So I set these tests to prove it to myself. To prove that I was right to not trust anyone. He looked at Tommy now. But then your son did something I didn't expect. Something I couldn't understand. He walked right past $10,000 in cash. He didn't even glance at it. Instead, he took off his only jacket and gave it to me. A stranger. A rich stranger who doesn't need anything. Robert's voice started to break. Do you know how long it's been since someone did something kind for me without wanting something in return? Do you know how long it's been since someone cared whether I was cold or warm or comfortable? Years. Decades, maybe. Tears were running down Robert's face now. Maria had never seen a grown man cry before, especially not a powerful, rich man like Mr. Harrison. Your son passed the test I didn't even know I was giving, Robert said. He didn't just prove he was honest. He proved he was compassionate. He proved he had a good heart. The kind of heart I thought didn't exist anymore. Robert stood up from his chair. He walked over to the table and picked up the envelope of money. He held it in his hands, looking at it. Maria, Robert said, I'm not going to fire you. In fact, I'm going to give you a raise. A significant raise. And I'm going to give you this. He held out the envelope. Maria shook her head immediately. No. No, sir, I can't accept that. Why not? Robert asked. Because I don't want your charity, Maria said firmly. I want to work for my money. I want to earn it honestly. Robert smiled, a real smile, the first genuine smile he had smiled in years. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. You have more pride and dignity than most rich people I know. He set the envelope back on the table. Then let's call it something else. Let's call it a bonus. For raising such a remarkable son. Maria opened her mouth to argue, but Robert held up his hand. Please, he said. Let me do this one good thing. Let me try to be less of a monster and more of a human being. Robert walked back to his chair and sat down. He suddenly looked very tired, not the fake tired of his pretend sleep, but genuinely exhausted. Tommy, Robert said, can you come here for a moment? Tommy looked at his mother. Maria nodded, and Tommy slowly walked over to Mr. Harrison's chair. Robert reached into his pocket and pulled something out. It was a small object, and when he opened his hand, Tommy saw what it was, a toy car. But not just any toy car. It was Tommy's favorite toy car. Tommy gasped. Red Lightning! Red Lightning was a small red race car that Tommy's father had given him for his 6th birthday, 2 months before Carlos died. It was Tommy's most treasured possession. He played with it every day. He slept with it under his pillow every night. This morning, when Maria was rushing to get Tommy ready to come to work with her, Tommy had shoved Red Lightning into his jacket pocket. He hadn't wanted to leave his favorite toy at home. But at some point during the day, maybe when Tommy had taken off his jacket to put it on Mr. Harrison, Red Lightning must have fallen out of the pocket. Tommy hadn't even noticed it was missing. I found this on the floor near my chair, Robert said, holding up the little red car. Is this yours? Yes, sir, Tommy said. My papa gave it to me. Robert examined the toy car carefully. It was well worn, with scratches and chips in the paint. One of the wheels was slightly bent. But it was clear that this car had been played with and loved. Your papa must have been a good man, Robert said softly. He was the best, Tommy said, his voice full of pride despite the sadness. He was strong and kind. He always helped people. He built buildings. A construction worker? Robert asked. Yes, sir. He built schools and hospitals. He said building things that help people was the most important job in the world. Robert felt another wave of shame wash over him. Here was a man, Carlos Rodriguez, who had worked with his hands, who had probably never been rich, but who had taught his son more about honor and kindness than Robert had ever taught his own children. Tommy, Robert said, I'd like to make a deal with you. A deal? Tommy asked. Yes. I'll keep this toy car. It will stay right here on this table in my library. Tommy's face fell. Red Lightning was his favorite toy. He didn't want to lose it. But before Tommy could say anything, Robert continued. But in exchange, I want you to come here every day after school. Tommy looked confused. Come here? Why? Because I need help, Robert said. This is a very big house, and I'm a very lonely old man. I need someone to keep me company. Someone to talk to. Someone to remind me what it's like to be a good person. He looked at Maria. With your mother's permission, of course. You could do your homework here in the library. I have thousands of books. You could read any of them you want. We could talk. Maybe you could teach me some of the things your papa taught you. Maria was stunned. Mr. Harrison, I don't understand. Why would you want Tommy here every day? Robert looked at her with honest, tired eyes. Because your son reminded me of something I'd forgotten. He reminded me that not everyone in the world is cruel or greedy. He reminded me that kindness still exists. And I need to be around that. I need to remember how to be kind myself. He turned back to Tommy. So what do you say? Will you come visit me every day? Will you help this grumpy old man become a little bit better? Tommy thought about it for a moment. Then he asked, Can I still play with Red Lightning sometimes? Robert laughed, a real, genuine laugh that surprised everyone in the room, including himself. Yes, Tommy. You can play with Red Lightning whenever you're here. In fact, I'll play with you. You'll play cars with me? Tommy asked, his eyes wide with surprise. I haven't played with toy cars in about 65 years, Robert admitted. But yes, I'll play cars with you. Tommy looked at his mother again. Maria was crying, but this time they were different tears. They were tears of relief and gratitude and hope. It's okay, Mama? Tommy asked. Maria nodded, unable to speak. Tommy turned back to Mr. Harrison and held out his small hand. Okay. Deal. Robert shook the boy's hand solemnly. Deal. Over the next few weeks, something extraordinary happened at the Harrison mansion. For the first time in decades, there was laughter in the house. Every day after school, Maria would bring Tommy to the mansion. While Maria worked, Tommy would go to the library where Robert would be waiting for him. At first, they just played with toy cars. Robert bought dozens of new toy cars and built elaborate tracks through the library. They raced Red Lightning against all the new cars. Red Lightning, despite being old and worn, always seemed to win. That's because he has heart, Tommy would explain seriously. Papa always said that having heart is more important than being new and shiny. As the weeks went by, they started doing other things too. Robert helped Tommy with his homework, explaining math problems and helping him with reading. Tommy was struggling in school. He had fallen behind after his father died because he had been too sad to focus. But with Robert's patient help, Tommy started to catch up. And Tommy helped Robert too, though Tommy didn't realize he was doing it. Just by being there, by being kind and cheerful and honest, Tommy was teaching Robert how to be human again. Robert started to change. He smiled more. He laughed more. He stopped being suspicious of everyone around him. When he talked to Maria or Mrs. Wilson or the other staff members, he actually looked them in the eye and asked them how they were doing. And he actually listened to their answers. Robert's own children noticed the change. When Michael called asking for money to buy a new boat, Robert said something he had never said before. No. No? Michael repeated, shocked. No, Robert said firmly. You have enough money, Michael. What you don't have is enough gratitude. Come visit me because you want to see me, not because you want something from me. Then we'll talk. Michael was furious and hung up the phone. But Robert didn't care. For the first time in years, Robert felt like he had done something right. One day, about 2 months after Tommy started visiting, Robert called Maria into his office. Mrs. Rodriguez, Robert said, I have a proposal for you. Maria felt nervous. What kind of proposal, sir? I want to pay for Tommy's education, Robert said. All of it. Private school, tutors if he needs them, and eventually college. Whatever he needs. Maria's eyes widened. Sir, I can't accept that. It's too much. I know it's a lot, Robert said. But Maria, your son has given me something invaluable. He's given me hope. He's given me a reason to want to be better. This is the least I can do to thank you both. But sir, please, Robert said, let me do this. I have more money than I could ever spend in 10 lifetimes. Let me use some of it to help a boy who actually deserves it. A boy who will probably do more good in the world than I ever did. Maria's eyes filled with tears. Mr. Harrison, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Robert said simply. Maria thought about Tommy's future. She thought about how she had been lying awake at night, worrying about how she would ever afford to send Tommy to college. She thought about how Tommy deserved every opportunity in the world. Yes, Maria whispered. Thank you? Thank you so much. Robert smiled. Thank you, Maria. Thank you for raising such a wonderful boy. And thank you for reminding me that good people still exist in this world. Time passed quickly. Seasons changed. Years flew by. Tommy grew from a small 8-year-old boy into a tall 18-year-old young man. He had graduated from one of the best private high schools in Chicago with top honors. He had been accepted to Harvard University, where he planned to study architecture. He wanted to design buildings, just like his father had built them. Robert was now 82 years old. He had grown frailler over the years, but his spirit had grown stronger. The bitter, angry man who had tested people and expected the worst was gone. In his place was a kinder, gentler man who believed in the goodness of people. Robert had changed his business practices too. He started paying his workers better wages. He started giving bonuses to employees who went above and beyond. He created a scholarship fund for the children of his employees. He donated millions to charity. And most importantly, he had rewritten his will. One Tuesday morning in June, Robert woke up in his favorite leather chair in the library. He had fallen asleep there the night before while reading a book. It was peaceful. And it was in that chair, surrounded by books and memories, that Robert Harrison passed away quietly in his sleep. The day of the will reading was somber. The library was filled with people, but it was eerily quiet. Robert's 3 children were there, Michael, Jennifer, and David. They sat together on one side of the room, dressed in expensive black clothes, checking their phones and watches. They hadn't visited Robert much over the past 10 years, even after he had tried to reconcile with them. They were here now because they expected to inherit billions of dollars. On the other side of the room sat Maria and Tommy. Maria was now 41, and the years of hard work and worry had finally lifted from her face. She looked healthy and happy. She was wearing a simple black dress, and she was crying genuine tears for the man who had changed her and her son's life. Tommy, now 18, sat next to his mother holding her hand. He was wearing a suit that Robert had bought him for his high school graduation. Tommy's eyes were red from crying. He had spent the last 3 days crying on and off. He hadn't just lost a benefactor, he had lost a friend. A mentor. A second grandfather. In Tommy's other hand, he held a small red toy car. Red Lightning. Robert had given it back to Tommy years ago, saying, "This belongs with you. But promise me you'll keep it forever." Tommy had promised. Mr. Chun, Robert's lawyer, stood at the front of the room with a folder containing Robert's last will and testament. "Let's begin," Mr. Chun said. He opened the folder and began to read. "I, Robert Harrison, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." Michael, Jennifer, and David leaned forward in their seats. "To my children, Michael, Jennifer, and David," Mr. Chun read, "I leave you each the trust funds that were established for you at your births. These funds contain $5 million each." The 3 children looked at each other in confusion. $5 million each? That was it? Their father was worth billions. "Wait," Jennifer said. That can't be right. What about the rest? The house? The companies? His investments? Mr. Chen held up his hand. Please let me continue. He looked back down at the document. To my children, I want to say this: I love you. I have always loved you. But I failed you as a father. I taught you to value money over relationships. I taught you to take instead of to give. I enabled your worst habits instead of encouraging your best qualities. For that, I am truly sorry. I leave you $5 million each because I know you need financial security. But I cannot in good conscience leave you more. You did not earn it through kindness or hard work. You expected it as your birthright. Instead, I am leaving the rest of my estate to someone who taught me the most important lesson of my life. The three children stood up, their faces red with anger. This is outrageous! Michael shouted. We'll contest this will. We'll. Please sit down, Mr. Chen said firmly. There's more. Reluctantly, they sat back down, their jaws clenched in fury. Mr. Chen continued reading. To Maria Rodriguez, I leave the sum of $10 million in gratitude for her years of loyal service and for raising the most remarkable young man I have ever known. I hope this money brings her comfort and security for the rest of her life. Maria gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. Tommy put his arm around his mother's shoulders as she began to cry. And finally, Mr. Chen read, to Tommy Rodriguez, I leave the remainder of my estate. This includes the Harrison Mansion and all its contents, my shares in Harrison Industries, my investment portfolio, my various properties, and all remaining assets. This amounts to approximately $2 billion. The room exploded in noise. Michael, Jennifer, and David were on their feet, shouting. Maria was sobbing. Tommy sat frozen in shock. This is insane! David yelled. He's just a kid. The maid's kid. Dad must have been senile when he wrote this. I assure you, Mr. Chen said calmly. Mr. Harrison was of completely sound mind. This will was written just 3 months ago, and I had him evaluated by 3 different doctors to ensure there could be no questions about his mental state. We'll sue, Jennifer threatened. We'll tie this up in courts for years. You're welcome to try, Mr. Chen said. But I should inform you that Mr. Harrison anticipated this reaction. He left a letter explaining his decision. Would you like me to read it? Yes, all 3 children shouted at once. Mr. Chen pulled out a handwritten letter. Robert's handwriting was shaky but clear. To my children and to anyone who questions this will, Mr. Chen began reading. I know you think I've lost my mind. You think I'm giving my fortune to strangers. But let me tell you a story. 10 years ago, I was a bitter, hateful old man. I had all the money in the world, but I was spiritually bankrupt. I didn't trust anyone. I didn't love anyone. I had convinced myself that every person on earth was greedy and selfish. I used to test people. I would pretend to be asleep and leave money out to see if they would steal it. Almost everyone did. And every time someone stole from me, my heart grew a little harder. But then, on a rainy October day, I met an 8-year-old boy named Tommy Rodriguez. I set my usual test. I left $10,000 on the table next to my chair. I pretended to sleep. And I waited for this poor child to steal from me. But he didn't. Instead, this little boy, who had nothing, whose father had died, whose mother struggled to feed him, this boy took off his only jacket and put it on me because he thought I was cold. He didn't even look at the money. He looked at me. He saw a person who needed help, and he helped me. In that moment, that child saved my life. Not literally, but spiritually. He showed me that goodness still exists in the world. He showed me that not everyone is motivated by greed. He showed me what it means to be truly rich. Over the past 10 years, Tommy has visited me almost every day. He's done his homework in my library. We've played together. We've talked together. He's told me about his dreams and his fears. He's made me laugh. He's given me a reason to wake up every morning. Tommy didn't do these things because he wanted my money. He did them because he has a genuinely kind heart. He is who he is because his mother and his late father raised him right. They taught him values that no amount of money can buy. To my children, I'm sorry that I failed you. I gave you money, but I didn't give you values. I gave you things, but I didn't give you time. I taught you to take, but I didn't teach you to give. That was my failure, not yours. To Tommy, I'm leaving you my fortune because I trust you to use it wisely. I trust you to use it to help people, to build things, to make the world better. I trust you to remember what your father taught you and what you taught me, that kindness is more valuable than gold. My final wish is this, Tommy, use this money to honor your father's memory. Build things that help people. Be generous. Be kind. And never, ever forget that the richest thing you own is not money, it's your heart. With love and gratitude, Robert Harrison. When Mr. Chen finished reading, the room was silent except for the sound of crying. Maria was weeping openly. Tommy had tears streaming down his face. Robert's 3 children looked stunned. They had no words. After a long moment, Tommy stood up. He was holding red lightning in his hand, running his thumb over the old toy car's scratched paint. Mr. Chen, Tommy said, his voice quiet but steady. I need to ask you something. Of course, Mr. Chen said. Can I share this inheritance with Mr. Harrison's children? The room went completely silent. Maria looked at her son in surprise. Michael, Jennifer, and David looked up with expressions of shock. Tommy, you don't have to, Maria began. I know, Mama, Tommy said. But I want to. He turned to face Robert's children. I know you're angry. I would be angry too if I were you. He was your father, and you feel like he chose me over you. I get that. Tommy took a deep breath. But here's the thing, Mr. Harrison didn't choose me because he didn't love you. He chose me because he wanted to teach you something. He wanted to teach all of us something. He held up red lightning. Mr. Harrison used to tell me that my dad, my biological dad, Carlos, was a hero. Not because he was rich or famous, but because he was kind. He helped people. He built things that made people's lives better. Mr. Harrison became like a second father to me. And you know what? He talked about you 3 all the time. He told me stories about when you were kids. He showed me pictures of you. He missed you. He wanted you to visit him not because he was dying, but because he loved you and wanted to spend time with you. Tommy's voice got stronger. He didn't cut you out because he hated you. He cut you down because he loved you and wanted you to learn what he learned, that money isn't everything. That kindness matters. That family matters. He turned back to Mr. Chen. So here's what I want to do. I want to keep the house because it has memories of Mr.